Hello, welcome to 30 Minutes. I'm Rick Anthony. Campaigning to win an election is grueling, both for the candidate and for their family. And if the candidate is successful, the first day in office is the beginning of a life-altering experience of being a servant of the people, all of the people, regardless of their party or regardless of who they voted for. My guest today, Jake Abel, has been Commissioner of Radnor Township's 6th Ward since 2017. He and his wife, Christy, have 4 sons. They are, of course, residents of Radnor Township. Jake has been in public service for over 20 years, first in Washington, D.C., serving as Foreign Policy Assistant to the Speaker of the House, and then professional staff member for the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and later as Intelligence Officer for the Defense Intelligence Agency. Currently, he's a director of a company that is focused on national security, intelligence, and risk issues, a job that requires high intelligence and very, very keen analytical skills. Jake is running for re-election as Commissioner of the 6th Ward. The theme of his campaign is promises made, promises kept. Jake, welcome to 30 Minutes. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
In full disclosure, I am a resident of the 6th Ward, and so I've known Jake for some time. Jake, you've been active in the township for a long time before you decided to run for elected office.
Sure.
What made you decide to take the leap into politics?
Well, people always say politics is about timing. In my case, some would argue it was not the right time. Christy and I, we moved here in 2011. We're both working professionals. We've got 4 young boys who are very active. At the time, I was serving on the Radnor Shade Tree Committee. I was also a board member with the Upper Mainline YMCA, two roles and 2 volunteer positions that I loved, and helped lay a foundation for my my knowledge and understanding of Radnor Township. But those 4 boys, I want to be a role model. I want to be a role model to them. I want to be a role model to the next generation that's coming up. So, I think it's important that we put ourselves out there. And I felt like I had some good ideas. A lot of friends in the ward, both younger and who have lived here for their lifetime. And I understood what they wanted to see. And I was able to lay that vision and those values out there and work together with the neighbors.
There wasn't a single issue or something that precipitated
no single issue. Well, I mean, if you want to be in general terms, I focus, as you laid out my resume, I worked for Congress for 10 years. And then in the intelligence community, all those positions, you need to be able to build coalitions, unify groups. And I think in a small community like ours, we need to be unified. We need to come together and focus and work together to achieve shared goals. And that's what that's what I talk about every day when I go out and knock on a door, talk to a neighbor, run into a friend at the grocery store. We talk about how can we work together to achieve this goal of ours. Transcending
political party and the ideologies that divide us.
So at the local level, I don't believe party politics just doesn't play a role. And I'll tell people, the R behind my name and the R behind your name and anyone's name stands for Radnor. Yeah. We shouldn't have party affiliations. When you call me, if anyone calls me, I don't ask what party are you registered for. I ask, what's your issue and how can I help you?
What was your first impression when you took your seat on the board, both of the board and of local government?
Yeah, I don't know that you want to ask me that. I found out early on that at least the makeup of Radnor at the time was very top-heavy. The manager was driving the issues, and in a lot of cases was the problem. 7 board members were constantly, divided, and a lot of it had to do with the leadership at the township. So it was important that we make that change, I'm very proud of the manager we were able to hire. I think the board functions better. I think the residents are served better.
What are the issues you feel most strongly about today?
Well, so a lot of people talk about issues. I take that back a step. I talk about values, and my values dictate where I fall on an issue. So the 4 values that I talk about every day with neighbors: fiscal responsibility, transparency in government, public safety, and the protection of our trees and our parks.
Trespassing government?
Transparency in government.
Transparency, I'm sorry.
Transparency.
My hearing. Although I like my version of it, trespassing government.
No. So you take those values and you look at issues.
Yeah.
You know, my key issue is, you know, going back to families and our younger generation. I want to build interconnected neighborhoods. And you've seen that over the last 4 years. We have 4 new crosswalks that have been passed and approved by the board. That allows families and children to...
You were advocating that?
Every day. So the 4 new crosswalks, and they're at major intersections. You know, this helps children get to schools, parks, friends' homes, and they can do it safely. And that's how we get people to places and bring people together.
Is today's campaign, the one you're involved in right now, materially different from your campaign in 2016, 17?
Yeah, I mean, in a number of ways. You know, one, I'm now, you know, I have a record to run on, and I'm very proud of that record. It's been an honor these last 4 years to represent Ward 6 and the neighbors. And, you know, I thank the neighbors for their involvement and engagement. You know, the accomplishments aren't possible without everyone that has gotten behind these issues. You know, it's easy to say no to me. Yes. It's hard to say no to 30 residents who show up and are advocating and supporting the same values and vision. So running on that record, you know, it's easy. It's easy to be a candidate. You know, it's easy to promise, you know, everything in the world. It's hard to follow through on those. And so when you say promises made, promises kept, if you go through my list of issues and vision in 2017, you know, we've checked every one of those off the list.
So what do you consider to be your most significant accomplishments as commissioner?
Well, in addition to the 4 crosswalks, which, you know, hopefully there'll be more in the coming years, you know, we've got a stormwater project at the West Wing Preserve that's taken 4 years to get through the state. And it's with DEP right now for final approval.
And you have driven that?
Spearheaded. You know, I've walked that. I've worked with the conservancy groups, neighbors, held town hall meetings, multiple town hall meetings. You know, visited the sites. You know, we've talked about this ad nauseum, and we're almost there. The Morse Road Streetscape project. You know, if you had driven on Morse Road 3 years ago, the trees were being cut down. You know, that beautiful cherry-lined streetscape. The trees were being cut down. The trees were the wrong size for the right-of-ways, so the root systems had uplifted the sidewalks and the curbing. And so you know, fast forward 3 years, you've got a brand new road. All the trees have been replaced. You can take your double stroller down those sidewalks safely now. You don't have to go onto Morse Road to circumvent the hazard. And you know, it's oftentimes the last road you leave when you exit Radnor Township, and you know, people know when they leave Radnor Township because it's starkly different.
What else? Your list of accomplishments.
You know,
your legacy.
We've got the Young Lungs at Play network, so that prohibits tobacco and smoking in our parks. You know, I love going to our parks. You know, I spend hours on the weekends at soccer fields, baseball fields, or just taking the kids out there to play. And we want our parks to be pristine. We want them to be clean, and clean air is part of it. So, you know, making sure that they're around and recognize that, you know, when I go to the park, it's a safe place, it's a clean area. That's what we want. Talk about park improvements. Odoricio Park, 40 years, relatively untouched. You know, it's probably one of the last parks in Radnor Township that hasn't seen attention. I was able to get $125,000 from a development project to be directed toward that park. You know, we've got that in a fund that is ready to use. Right. I was able to get the basketball court resurfaced, which will happen in spring of 2022. And I've identified two funds, $300,000 that we saved on the Morse Road Streetscape project, and about $370,000 from a park fund that is just sitting there. I've proposed that we use that to put a new comfort station and start the renovations at Odoricio Park. The other board members have said no, and so, you know, I want the residents of Ward 6 to know that's not just a neighborhood park. That's a community park. Yeah. Legion baseball's played there, soccer's played there. The middle school plays activities there. When it snows, everyone in the township comes there to sled. So that part deserves attention. I will continue to propose that we use those funds to get a comfort station. And I'll just give you a little story. I was at the park watching middle school soccer a couple weeks ago. One game finishes, you play a long game, drink a lot of fluids, and a lot of the players need to use the bathroom. They don't run up to the old bathroom. I saw 12 kids run into the woods in a neighborhood. That's not what we want. Think about it if a female sports team comes out, and soccer usually show up in a uniform, and if the other team's wearing the same color uniform, you have to change. Where are those female players changing if they're not going to the comfort station that's there because it's old, decrepit, or not safe? So it's time. The funds are there, and we need to start moving on that.
I know you have felt, and you've talked frequently about first responders and the obligation to provide them with the support, the services, the materials they need.
Yeah, and this really took center stage after the storms of August 2018. Within 2 weeks, I was holding a public safety meeting, and I listed four items that I saw were key issues. We needed to make sure that first responders received necessary training. We needed to get them new equipment. I saw pictures from that day where firefighters, and they're going to go in whatever they have. They're our bravest, and if they have khaki shorts and tennis shoes on, they're going into those waters. But we need to make sure that they have appropriate equipment to go into waist-high water when we don't know what's floating down below. I talked about, we can do all the stormwater projects in the world. We're not going to solve the flooding problem in Radnor Township. What we can do is we can look for low-cost options to help protect people and property. One of those things is, we've got a number of public parking areas. Why not open those up during major storms and just let neighbors who live in flood-prone areas park their vehicles so they don't have to worry about coming out to a flooded vehicle, or worse yet, come out in the middle of the storm and think that they have to move their vehicle to save it. I mean, that puts everybody at risk. And then the final thing is I talked about, let's get a vehicle. Let's not risk our police vehicles, are oftentimes cars that are low to the ground, or other vehicles, and putting them into the waters. Let's get a true flood safety vehicle and use that to go in and rescue people or save, pull vehicles out if we need to. And to this, 6 months later, a year later, we have all those things I talked about are fulfilled.
Because you feel so strongly and have behaved in a way that seems to transcend politics to the extent that you can in the real world, do you feel that you're now getting support from both sides, both Democrats and Republicans? Have you seen evidence of that during the campaign?
Well, let me just go back and talk about the way I handle myself, in my family life, my personal life, and then in the public life. And it goes back to an adage my baseball coach in college told me. He said, "Don't do anything to embarrass yourself, your family, or your team."
Good advice.
Best advice I ever received. So,
but that was from the Midwest, right?
From the Midwest. Okay. So I treat people, the way I hope people treat me. And for the most part, my neighbors, the residents in Ward 6 have been great to me. They've been great to Christy, and and the boys, oftentimes don't know that I'm even involved in the local community, and that's the way I want it. Now, what was the specific question?
Whether or not you've been getting support from both sides, and has that surprised you in any way?
No. So 4 years ago, I mean, I was surprised at the number of it's just the amount of not only the amount of support, but the wide range of support, and it came from registered Republicans, Democrats, Independents, and people who just didn't care about government in general. And those people, you know what they cared about? And I still get this comment to today. They said, I've lived here for 20 years, 30 years. I never know who my commissioner was. I never received a newsletter. They never showed up at my door. I never saw him walk on my street. You're the first person that's ever come and paid attention to like what I wanted, what my concerns were. And so, that momentum has just carried on for the last 4 years. And today, it's humbling, but I think we have signs on 80 yards. A third of those are on yards that are not registered Republicans because they believe in the message. They believe in, we need to be unified. We need to build coalitions to achieve shared goals.
By contrast, you have said that your opponent's handlers have been lying and distorting your record.
Yeah.
How?
So I don't use the word lying. I say mischaracterizing and misleading. And it's easy to do. Again, when you're the candidate, you can make promises because you don't have a record. And in this case, if you run a campaign for 9 months and you don't have a platform, you don't lay out any issues, you don't show any values, 2 weeks before an election, you have one option left, and that's to attack and go negative. And that's what we've seen. We were prepared for it. We're not going to respond in kind. But yeah, so 2 examples. The budget.
Before I correct what I've said, I have no evidence that they've been lying. Misrepresenting, perhaps distorting is a better way to characterize it.
Yeah, so it's misleading. So it's true. I have voted against the last 3 budgets. So I voted against 3 budgets, and a budget includes $40 million worth of projects and expenditures. So it's
you can't please everybody.
And it's a commonly used tactic in national politics and local politics that if somebody votes against the budget, an omnibus, at the national level, people say they don't support anything in there. Those just aren't the facts. If we look at that budget, and every budget that we've had since I've been a member of the board, that budget includes increases for our first responders. Ask yourself why those increases were put in there. Ask yourself why the conversation of first responders became a priority on the board. And it's because I raised those issues. To say I don't support first responders, that's where we're misleading. Yes, I voted against the budget. I don't believe in budgets. First of all, fundamentally, I don't believe in tax increases in budgets. And I don't believe in tax increases when we're going through COVID and we're not seeing the revenue that we had forecasted. That's where smart people need to put their heads together and figure out where we can make cuts. Do we need to hire additional staff during a pandemic? Right. Can we push projects off to future years? And are there things that are just duplicative in the budget? And that goes to another misleading characterization and allegation that I don't believe in senior services. I don't support our budget funding Surrey services, which does not reside in Radnor Township. Right. Should we be funding every 501c3 that supports a Radnor resident but doesn't have headquarters in Radnor Township? No. We have a very tight budget. There are a lot of requests. I'd rather see that funding go towards resurfacing roads. We have park projects. We have the Sulpizio gym that needs major renovations. And if that gym isn't able to be used, we have nowhere for our youth to do recreational sports in the spring, fall, and summer. So that's why you see me vote against budgets, because the priorities don't align with mine. And on senior services, I made it very clear. When we talk about 501c3s, I believe in support. The library, the fire company, and Wayne Senior Center, I put to a separate category. Those are things that are unique, and I believe we need. Some of the other 501c3s, Surrey Services, the Wayne Arts Center, which I love the Wayne Arts Center. I'm probably the only commissioner who goes there on an annual basis, and they've asked me to help give out the awards at the annual Wayne Art exhibit. So I love everything that they stand for and they do. I've been in Florida, and there have been artists down there who have heard that I'm from Radnor Township, and they said, "Oh, you know, the Wayne Arts Center."
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, the Wayne Arts Center is nationally known,
Yes,
and it does
internationally.
yeah, and it does amazing work. But we've got to be able to draw that line because, like I said, we've got other priorities, and we've got to figure out what those are.
Jake, have you been accessible, thoughtful, and hardworking? The attributes that your opponent says she will bring to the position?
Well, on the accessibility,
and isn't that to be expected of any public servant?
It is. You know, so I mean, if I was to put together a definition of Radnor Commissioner, you know, the accessible, transparent, and a good communicator would be probably the three words, you know, the four words I use to describe, you know, what goes into this job. I mean, the accessibility issue is probably a question that you should ask Christy. You know, as I come home late at night and she says, "Where have you been for the last 2 hours?"
Yeah.
I mean, and you know, the previous commissioner, Don Curley, you know, he recently wrote an endorsement for me, and he said, I'm paraphrasing, the most accessible commissioner, you know, he's ever seen, including himself. And you know, it's I mean, those are nice words to hear from somebody, especially from Commissioner Curley.
Yep.
But I hold myself to that standard. You know, I spend hours during the week out just walking streets. You know, I sit at parks, oftentimes at sons' soccer games. And if, you know, a resident wants to pull me aside and ask me a question, I'll step aside. So there's some sacrifice that goes along with it, but it's the role I signed up for. It's the role I love, and you know, I'm out there every day talking about my values, my vision, and working with neighbors to figure out where we have commonalities, where we can, you know, put our minds together to solve problems.
But I know from what you've told me in the past that you and Christy had some serious conversations about whether or not you were going to run for re-election.
Yeah, this
because of the demands on the family.
Yeah, this was it was not easy, and there were often times at the end of 2020 where, you know, it was a strong likelihood I was not going to run again. And not to get too deep into those personal conversations, but I think as we were out in the public, and Christy was with me, and more people came up and they would raise the issue and say, "Jake, you know, we'd like to see you run again. I mean, you've done so much for this neighborhood. You know, we need you. You know, we want you to be part of this." And I mean, at some point she pulled me aside and said, "You have to." So I mean, there are tough moments, and you know, after this is done, I you know, thanks will never be enough. But you know, I'm enjoying it. I think Christy and the boys understand what we're trying to do here, and the message that we're trying to convey, not only to our family but to the community.
Has anyone charged you with running a dirty campaign?
No, I would hope not. And here it's the people that are involved in my campaign. You know, I've made it very clear to them. You know, if you go negative, if somebody lets me know that there's been some negative conversation, you're no longer part of our campaign. You know, that's just not. We're a small community. We're neighbors. We have disagreements, but you know, you start dividing streets, and we can never achieve the goals that we're trying to get to.
One Radnor is more than just a slogan for you.
It is. You know, this goes back to my childhood. You know, I lived in a small community. You know, I know the importance of knowing your neighbor, trusting your neighbor, and working together. And it's those are values that, you know, carry with me, you know, through a lifetime.
So, Jake, what are the hot issues? Budget is always at the top of the list, particularly this time of year. But what are some of the other hot issues? What are some of the things that, given the opportunity, you will continue to work for, not just for the 6th Ward, but for the township, for all residents of Radnor Township? Yeah,
so a couple issues that are on, I mean, they're on the radar, but they're going to definitely spill over into future years. Stormwater. You know, we've had this I've raised this concern a number of times. We have a stormwater issue in Ryder Township, and these storms are getting heavier and heavier, and we're seeing more flooding. We're not going to solve the flooding, but we all pay a stormwater fee. We need to move on these stormwater projects. We can do good for neighborhoods if we just.
The money's there, isn't it?
Well, there's money there. There's not money for all the projects we need to do.
Yeah.
But
there's a significant amount of money that was allocated several years ago.
Yep, and we'll take out a line of credit. I think that's the direction we're going.
Yeah.
But we need to get these projects before the board, and we need to vote on them. I'm confident we're going to get there. I see the list. And we're moving closer and closer on each project. So I would think over the next 6 to 12 months, we'll see hopefully 2 or 3 more before the board for approval. The other issue that I don't think we can escape, I know that people have raised concerns about, is cell connectivity. We have more people working from home these days.
Yes.
We have some areas in the township based on topography that we have poor cell service.
Well, what do you expect to come of the board's review of the consultant's opinion on microcells?
Well, as we've heard from the law firm who's advising the township, these carriers are essentially utility companies. They have the ability to work in our right-of-ways, which is kind of which is exactly what I was telling people 3 years ago. So and my advice to neighborhoods or streets that are vulnerable or that have poor cell service and may need a network, you need to get involved. You need to participate. You need to engage and understand the process. Where the network would be located, the light post, etc.
As you have with the community I live in.
Yeah, and your neighbors.
We've been proactive.
Your neighbors have been proactive, and you guys are ahead of the game because as you guys heard, once a carrier decides they want to put a network in, there's a 60 to 90 day shot clock. That doesn't leave a lot of room for town hall meetings, neighbor engagement, looking at different light posts, where you want the boxes located. So all that work was done up front, and so if it ever comes, if it comes to that point, you guys are ready to go. Other neighborhoods have decided not to do that, and they believed because the board took a sense of the board to not allow carriers to come in and do the engineering, that they were protected. Yes. As we've heard, and as a solicitor for the firm who's advising us on the cell ordinance said, you can't spot zone these. They can come wherever they want to.
But I know what you've done in making people aware of all of this is continue to track the technology as it improves, and all of this electronic paraphernalia is miniaturized and now fits in a single unit rather than multiple units. They're pretty ugly.
Yeah. There's no question that what we have on utility poles is aesthetically not pleasing, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to.
But it's getting better.
It's meant to solve an issue. So I've had companies, as far south as Florida, contact me and talk about, because they've heard I've worked on this issue. They're now doing subsurface systems, and there's a prototype soon to be deployed, I think, to New Jersey. Again, I'm not a proponent or opponent. My job is to provide options and to make sure people are informed.
Jake, we've covered a lot of territory. You're in the middle of a really tough campaign. Wish you well. We'll see how it turns out. Radnor is better, and the 6th Ward is better, frankly, for your involvement and your being here. We'll see how it all turns out.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
This has been 30 Minutes with Jake Abel, who is the Commissioner of the 6th Ward, running for re-election. Until next time, this is Rick Anthony speaking at you here in the Radnor Studio 21. Take very good care of yourselves.